Good evening. This is the last evening of our Seattle closed class, and it has been, I don't have to tell you, it has been an enjoyable experience, and it has been a fruitful one. Within a few months, there'll be 5,000 people hear this entire class, and it's a class that I'll be happy for them to hear, to know that they are going to hear it, because there are important points that have come up, and more than the points themselves, the state of consciousness has been so beautiful and harmonious that they will feel it as they hear the message. And it is evident that there have been questions of real, vital importance to student and teacher. Questions showing that we are attaining a higher state of consciousness than we have heretofore experienced. Ordinarily, you can almost I can almost write out the questions in advance of a class. But because every class brings up the same questions. But now we're moving into a new area of consciousness where that isn't true. And on the whole, the questions this week have been different, and they have been inspiring to read and to answer. And so it is on our closing night. I'm going to ask you to be relaxed. Don't strain, because we have some important questions and there'll be important answers. And it isn't going to be necessary to strain to hear them, because you're to relax and be receptive and responsive without a mental effort. How can you be receptive and responsive without a mental effort? First, agree that you're not going to learn anything new, that anything you hear has already been imparted to you on the inner plane. And what you hear with your ears is merely going to be the outer expression of that which is already within you. It isn't something that's going to come to you from me. It's something that's going to come from God to all of us. Why is that? There is only one consciousness. That consciousness is God. That consciousness is your consciousness and mine. So if there's anything in God consciousness, you already have it, because you have God consciousness. If there's anything in my consciousness, you already have it, because we have one and the same consciousness. When we're still, when we're quiet, when we're receptive and responsive, when we start thinking and fighting and reasoning and arguing, then each of us is trying to have a mind of our own and trying to get it satisfied, and there are no answers. But if you're still and silent and receptive, you won't be still, silent, and receptive to me. You'll be still, silent, and receptive to the still small voice that's going to speak in me and in you. Now, first, there's the question as to what is the basic difference between our work and that of another author, and it would be an impossibility for me to answer that without hours of time. Sufficient to say to the one who asked the question, there is very little that is alike in the two teachings. Very little. The approach is entirely different. As I've said before, with the basic understanding, of course, that God, in both cases, is the underlying principle. But after you've said that, the approach goes into far different directions and would take a long time to explain. But the two cannot work together as a working basis. Now, will you please comment on this? A friend this week said that the word praise and the act of praising God was merely a human or mental activity a mortal material gesture. To me, the joy and praise expressed in these lines from the 104th Psalm, 33 and 34, I will sing unto the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise unto my God while I have my being. My meditations of him shall be sweet. I will be glad in the Lord, is the outpouring from a God-conscious soul. Now, there again, you come to two different questions. When there is a spontaneous welling up inside of a person of praise and gratitude and joy, that is, of course, what the psalmist experienced. But the psalmist doesn't mean that if you wake up in the morning feeling sour and just walk around saying, praise ye, praise ye, praise ye, oh Lord, how wonderful you are, that there is any value in it. You are putting on an act. That's all. So for a person to go to church or to read a book and sit around and make the declarations, oh, I praise God, oh, I praise the Almighty, oh, there's no value in that. That is a mortal, material gesture. It is like prayers that you read out of a prayer book. They have no spontaneity, no originality, and no emotion, no depth of feeling. Somebody else wrote them, somebody else was inspired to write them, and you are parroting them. That's all. Now, that is the vain repetition the Master spoke of. So when you pray in made-up words or thoughts or formulas, no matter how inspiring they are, no matter how true they are, there's no power in them. It's an activity of the human mind. It's an activity of the human will. But when some inspired song of the soul comes forth, joyously, spontaneously, sometimes hilariously, that, of course, is a spiritual prayer. That is a hymn of thanksgiving. That is a hymn of praise. That has nothing to do with the human mind, because the human mind didn't think it up. It was something that came from a divine impulse within. It's almost the difference, of falling in love spontaneously, love at first sight, and just bubbling all over, love when there's no outward reason for it, and the other kind of love that says, this marriage would be fine for me, I'd have a good income and I'd provide a good home, and, well, you see, there's the difference. One is just a man-made institution for human welfare, and the other might be a marriage made in heaven. And so it is with this. It is the reason we do not encourage affirmations or denials in our work, and yet we do take passages from Scripture and ponder them until something spontaneously wells up in us and we say, oh, now I see. And then comes the joy, then comes the happiness from them. And so it is, whether it is praising God, if it's done humanly, if it's done mechanically, if it's done without emotion, without an inner bubbling, there's no value to it. You can put that in the same class with tithing. When tithing is done because it's a religious belief or a religious rite, or because you ought to do it, or because you expect a blessing from it, better off not to do it. There's no value in it. But when a person is so inspired with the love of God that they wish in some way or other to share that blessing, either with their church or with an orphan asylum or with the Red Cross or the Salvation Army, wherever it may be, and they spontaneously say, oh, here is my tithe, here is 1% of my income, 5, 10%, 20%, then they are pouring out their own heart in an externalized form. And that type of tithing, that type of giving, brings back blessings untold, sometimes in the form of 10 times more money, but mostly in the form of healing, harmony, peace of mind, peace of soul. Why? Because out of the heart comes the issues of life, not out of the mind, out of the heart, out of the emotion, out of the depth of one's feelings comes the issues of life. And when one can be spontaneously joyous, spontaneously happy, that is something. I've told you the experience about forgiving and loving, where I've acknowledged openly that there were occasions when I couldn't forgive, when I couldn't love, and to say that I was forgiving and loving was just being a hypocrite. So what's the use of going around with lip service of forgiveness and love when I don't have it? But I found a substitute for it. And so when I found that I couldn't love and I couldn't forgive, I just said, well, Father, I'm satisfied if you love them and you'll forgive them. So you take over and do all the loving you can and all the forgiving you can, because right now I'm not in the mood. But so far as I was concerned, I got the healing, because I wasn't holding people in bondage, desiring their punishment. That's where my healing came in. But actually, at the moment, I couldn't love. I couldn't say that I forgive and be truthful. And so I found the other outlet. Well, it's the same way. There may be days when you can't praise God, when you can't be joyous or joyful without putting on an act. So the best thing to do is say, well, God, I love you just the same, but I can't show it to you just this minute. Trust me for a little while, and I'll do it double next time. I find consolation talking to God that way. I don't know how others do. For some, it isn't scientific enough. But for me, it's the way I get along with God. And sometimes I have an idea He understands me too, and sort of forgives my lack of formality. I hope that answers that. In regard to spiritual healing, what are the requirements necessary? What are the requirements, necessary conditions, and specific techniques as far as patient and therapist are concerned? Could a specific case report be given in some detail? I think so. Let's hold that aside a minute. When one refuses to accept the testimony of the outer senses as true and has not yet become aware of an inner vision, how is it then possible to progress? By standing fast. Let us assume now that the testimony of the senses is not good. And so we'll say that judging by appearances, the situation's kind of bad. But we have come to a place where we say, no, I'm not going to judge by appearances. I'm not going to accept sense testimony. I'm going to stand in the truth, even though I can't feel it at the moment. I'm going to stand in the truth of God as the substance of all form. God as the only law in this situation. God as the only cause in this situation. And so we will rehearse within ourselves the truth of being as we understand it. And then we say, all right, now that's that, and I'll stand on it. Well, 5 minutes later, 50 minutes later, 5 hours later, the thing comes back to plague us. The thought, the condition, the appearance. No, I'm standing on the truth that I must not judge by appearances. I must not accept sense testimony. I'm standing on it. And that's all you can do now, whether you stand on it for 30 hours, 30 days, or 30 months. There's nothing to do but stand on it. Now, if you want an illustration of that, there's Mr. Rickenbacker out in the Pacific Ocean in a rubber boat. And there's nobody coming to find him. And the heat is terrible. And there's an absence of food and water. Now, that's the sense testimony. That's the appearance. But Mr. Rickenbacker is a student of some form of metaphysics. And he sits this way. Now, what's going on in his mind? Remember, here's the big Pacific Ocean, burning him and his friends up with sun, heat, lack of water, lack of food. What can he do there? There's only one thing he can do, and that's what he did. I can't accept sense testimony. I know that I'm not saying that these are his words, but these must have been his reaction. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. This very place, even though it seems like hell, thou art there. You know, if I look around here, this is the valley of the shadow of death. It won't be long now. Yeah, that's sense testimony. But thou art there. Whither can I flee from the Spirit of God? Out in the Pacific? Oh no. The Spirit of God must be there too. Now, you know, hours pass and hours, and the cold night follows the hot day, and another cold night follows another hot day. By that time, I guess most of us be saying, well, God, I guess you deserted us, or maybe we sinned and you're punishing us. But no, he just sits there calmly, peacefully. How can I get outside the realm of God? Where will I go to get away from God's goodness? Where in Christ Jesus' teaching does it say that I or anybody else can be punished for sin? If I am to forgive 70 times 7, how many times is God to forgive me? Well, then I'm not being punished. Neither are these men being punished. Neither are we outside of God's kingdom. As in heaven, so on earth. God's right here. All that God is in heaven, God must be on earth and on the waters of the Pacific too. I can imagine that that must have been his reaction to the situation. And then all of a sudden a few fish jump up out of the sea into the boat. And I suppose Rickenbacker says, well, God, that's a pretty good job. Your aim was good. A little later, a couple of birds come down and sit on his head and wait to be captured. Well, God, it's evident you're right around here somewhere. And then comes some water down from the blue sky. Fresh water. And Rickenbacker doesn't get excited. It doesn't say anywhere in any of the accounts that he got excited. He just sort of expected God was there, and God was there. Well, you think that goes on day in and day out, that he'd finally give up hope and say, I guess we're doomed, but not that man. No. He just says, I can't see how God can leave me or forsake me when the Scripture is so clear, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Before Abraham was, I am with you. I will be with you till the end of the world. No, he said, I guess I can trust that. I'd rather trust that than the evidence of my senses, because what I'm seeing isn't so good. So he has to live with his scriptural promises, knowing that he has fulfilled his part of the bargain. For years and years and years, he has lived in the secret place of the Most High. He has depended on God and other experiences. He keeps the Word in his consciousness and abides in the Word and lets the Word abide in him. How now, after obedience to all that, how can he be forsaken? And lo and behold, the day comes of rescue. Now then, if you refuse to accept sense testimony, you can't say, I refuse to accept it for 24 hours, but if it doesn't change tomorrow, I'll begin to accept it. There's no room in spiritual wisdom for that. Moses, you know, had to deny material evidence for 40 years. Jesus had to deny material evidence in the Garden of Gethsemane and up on a crucifix and 3 days in a tomb. Nobody says that you can deny the evidence of the senses and then 5 minutes later find the shade rolled up and you sitting on cloud 9. Doesn't say that at all. On the contrary, if you will study Scripture and follow the trials and tribulations of the Hebrew prophets, and then later of the Master, of Paul, of John, Peter in prison, John of Patmos in prison on the island, you say those fellows really had appearances to deny. And the appearances didn't always disappear in 24 hours. Sometimes they had to stand fast. Now then, we are called upon to stand fast and refuse to accept the testimony of the senses in all cases, whether it is a case of short duration or long duration. And in my work I have found this. There are some people of deep material sense. They're just grounded in it. They can't help it. They were born that way. They came into this experience deeply material, without a single ability to grasp a spiritual truth. There are other people, and you hear that spoken of a great deal in metaphysics, the intellectuals. It's almost an impossibility to break through them. Once a person gets to be an intellectual, they're as near lost as you can get to be, unless they waken out of it, because it's a complete barrier to the things of the spirit, because the intellect demands outside proof. It must be able to see the wounds. It must be able to see, hear, taste, touch, smell, or reason. And the moment you get them beyond that, they're lost. Now then, you have experiences like that of Einstein. You have experiences of some of the, well, Sir James Jeans, many men of that type, who, through their very depth of intellectuality, one day broke through it and said, my heavens, you've got to break that barrier before you can understand. And so you have an Einstein saying that you do not rightly understand mathematics until you've gone beyond the figures that you can see, read, and analyze. And he calls it crossing over into the intuitive sense. Now, the Jung school of psychiatry has almost turned itself upside down, embracing the spiritual approach to life. And psychiatrists of the Jung school are all being taught that they must revamp their understanding. They must go back and study over again and embrace this spiritual approach to life. Now, there are those who can break through that shell of intellectualism, but there are many who cannot, who just seem stuck at the barrier of not being able to go beyond reason. For them, standing fast is a difficult thing. And it is for that reason, when they do turn to spiritual approach, that whoever their practitioner or teacher may be requires patience and perseverance to stand by with them, knowing that they're going through more kinds of hell than any other 10 people on the face of the earth. They really are being called upon to give up their Lord. And as long as they're willing to stick, the patient and the practitioner has to do it. I mean, the practitioner and the teacher has to do it, so as to lead them to where they want to go. Now, the answer summed up is then, stand fast in what you understand. Refute the testimony of the senses. Understand that good humanhood or bad humanhood is not the point. Sick humanhood or well humanhood is not the point. The point is the realization of spiritual being. And then you'll find the divine harmonies made manifest. Now we have two questions here that are aligned. How does the patient benefit from the practitioner's treatment? What is the principle of practitioner's technique? Now, I must explain this. In all mental approaches to life, and I mean by that the mental sciences, mental metaphysics, mental science, psychology and psychiatry, all of these, and psychosomatic medicine, all of these are based on a premise that you have a mind of your own, and that this mind is the source of either your health or your disease. That somewhere within your mind lies the trouble. And so it is that you are analyzed. You are questioned. You are questioned as to your present mode of life, degree of happiness, prosperity, or otherwise. Often you are questioned all the way back into your childhood, always looking for a cue or a clue to what there is in your mind that is bringing on this difficulty. It is for that reason that there are lists published which would indicate that if you are sensual, lustful, that you may develop tuberculosis. If you are hateful, jealous, envious, malicious, that you may develop cancer. That if you are resentful, worrisome, fearful, that you may develop rheumatism or ulcers or some other thing. Now then, the first thing that we face is this. If this were true, you would be hopeless. Because supposing we find that you are jealous, envious, and malicious, what are we going to do about it? Tell you to get over it? How are you going to get over it? How are you going to change your disposition? And I can tell you from long experience that you can't. You can try, but you'll never succeed. There is no way that you humanly can be told your faults and get over them. It's like telling a drunkard to stop drinking. You know, there is a story about the perfect way to cure alcoholism. There is a way. It won't fail, ever, for those who can live up to it. Oh, it's really true. It's a sure cure. Every time an alcoholic lifts a glass of liquor, just let him open his hand. Can't help it. He's bound to be cured. Yes, but you know he can't open his hand. It's the one thing he can't do. It's like the old story of the blackbird. You know it. Just don't think of blackbirds and all will be well. And you go home and see what happens when you're told not to think of blackbirds. I have seen it in over 20 years of practice. How many people have been told, of course I know what's wrong with you. If only you would be more grateful. If only you'd be more joyous, more spiritual. Yeah, what am I going to do about it? That's the answer. What am I going to do about it? Oh, you know, you're quite a lie. You don't tell the truth enough. You're a fibber. Well, I know it, but I don't want to be. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to change? Well, I'm going to tell you another secret that I've learned. I have never yet found out some error about a person that they agreed on. The very thing that I found out about them was the thing they said was wrong with me. No one has ever agreed when I told them they were jealous. No one has ever agreed when they were told they were envious or penurious. Oh, no. No, that's what they were thinking about me. Now then, even if you could make them agree, all right, I'm a miser, I can't help it. I'm afraid of money. I'm afraid to spend it. I'm afraid of my future. I'll agree, I'm a miser. Now what do you want me to do? Go out and spend money? I can't. It's painful. All right, now how are you going to get a person to overcome their miserliness? How are you going to get a person to be grateful that isn't grateful? Or answering this other question, how are you going to get a person to be joyous and to praise God if they don't feel it? Just go around mouthing the words? That isn't doing it. So even if it were true that the trouble was in your mind, you would then be in a hopeless shape because nobody would be able to tell you how to get rid of it. Now there is a way to get rid of it. And there is a way in which we are successful. But it is not by disclosing your error to you and having you try to correct it. And the reason is this: the error actually isn't yours. Now that's the secret. It isn't in your mind at all. I don't care what it is. It isn't in your mind at all. Whatever there is of good in your experience is the universal good we call God, which is expressing itself through you. The Master says, "Why callest thou me good? There is but one good, and that's the Father in heaven." And you can be assured of this, that nobody has any individual good. If you are charitable, it is merely because you are an outlet for God's benevolence. If you are loving, if you are kind, if you are forgiving, if you are gentle, it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your family. It has nothing to do with your inheritance. Why, the same family has got brutes in it and Christs in it with the same inheritance. There's no personal thing about it at all. When you are good, it is because the activity of good is finding outlet through you, and there's no use you're taking credit for it because you didn't do anything to bring that about. Now, on the other hand, if you are doing evil, or you're patient, it isn't you doing it either. When Paul says, the good I would not, no, the evil that I would not, that I do. The good that I would, I do not. But he says, when I would do good, I find an evil law in me. It isn't I who am sinful. I find a sinful law in me. And that wasn't an alibi, that was a metaphysical truth. Evil is impersonal. And there are people who are instruments for the outlet of evil, just as there are people who are instruments for the outlet of good. Now, once you see that there is only one universal mind, you do not have to treat your patient. You do not have to hear your patient's story. If they want to get it off their chest, that's all right. It relieves them. But so far as you as a practitioner are concerned, you're no more interested in their story as to whether they stole 10 cents or $10 million or whether they stole once or 1,000,000 times. That has nothing to do with you. Why? Because that evil is not a part of their mind or being. It is a universal belief for which they are the outlet. Now, number one is, you first of all have to understand that. You have to understand that there is one infinite mind, and that good is the inherent nature of that mind, and therefore good is the only real qualities of man. Now, when you come up against evil, you first of all know there is no mind from which it can emanate, since there is only the one universal mind. Therefore, there is no reality or law to that evil. Now, watch what happens. When a person comes to me who is ill, and I don't care whether it's a mental condition or a physical condition or a moral one or a financial one. I take no thought about them or about the condition. I turn to my principle. What is the principle? God is a universal consciousness. God is the universal spiritual mind of individual man. There's only one mind, only one consciousness. That one universal mind or consciousness is the mind or consciousness of individual man, and its qualities are only good. That is basic truth. Now, as against that, we have an appearance of evil in the form of physical, mental, moral, or financial ill. Now, so far as I'm concerned, there's no more patient except me. I'm the patient. Because it is to me that a case of sin, disease, death, lack, or limitation is being presented. So I'm the only one who has to be treated. All right? Right out here now is this appearance that's been sent to me in a letter, over the telephone, or in a person coming to my office. It isn't a person I'm interested in. It's the appearance, the claim. The claim is sin, disease, death, lack, limitation. The claim is a selfhood apart from God. The claim is a law apart from God. The claim is a substance apart from God. The claim is a mind apart from God, or a soul apart from God, and I won't accept it. I understand that that appearance is only a mental concept in thought with no underlying law, substance, cause, or reality. I don't care who the patient is, Jones, Brown, Smith, Hitler, Stalin, that has nothing to do with me. The only thing it has to do with me is that they have presented this appearance to me. They have asked for help, or one near them who is, you might say, acting as them, has asked for help. And so that unites us. I'll bring that to you this way. Since there is only one mind in this room, we are all united in that mind. Now then, the moment you bring yourself here, you are elevated by my degree of elevation in consciousness. Why? Because we are one. You have brought yourself here. But you may have left your pet dog or cat at home and brought them here in your mind, and you're presenting them to me. It's just the same as if you'd brought the dog or cat. You don't have to bring them in body. You brought them in your consciousness. And so they're here, and you've presented them to me, and when you go home, your dog or cat should be healed if they weren't when you left there. In other words, whatever you have in your mind, when you bring to the practitioner, you're making a part of the practitioner's mind. Why? It is all one mind. But there are degrees of elevation, and if I be lifted up, will draw you to that elevation of consciousness. Now, the only thing we're ever dealing with is not sick people and not diseases. That is out entirely. We have no sick people and we have no diseases. We have a principle, and that's all we're dealing with. The principle is God made all that was made. All that God made is good. God being infinite, all is good. As against that, we have an appearance. And that appearance is sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, stupidity, insanity, immorality. Doesn't make a difference. It's an appearance. It's a claim of a life apart from God, a claim of a mind apart from God, claim of a soul apart from God, claim of substance or form apart from God. And that I understand to be a mental image and thought without substance, without law, without cause, without reality. That's all I have to do, is maintain myself on that level of consciousness. And whoever brings themselves to that state of consciousness is lifted up to where the so-called law is nullified. For instance, there isn't a year that we don't have calls for poison ivy, poison oak. And so far as material law is concerned, there is a poison ivy and there is a poison oak, and it becomes painful and so forth and so on. I have never known of a single case of that lasted 24 hours after it hit the consciousness of a practitioner. That is, after a practitioner was called. Why? Because in the practitioner's consciousness, there is the realization that God is the life of all that is, whether it's physical, animal, mineral, vegetable. If God is its life, it is not diseased life, it is not infectious, it is not contagious, and the belief that it is not law. The moment it's handled from that standpoint, it loses its power and disappears. All right? There's another way to handle the same thing. Anything that exists as externalized form is not power. I don't care whether it's a brain or a body or poison ivy or poison oak or whether it's a snake. I don't care what it is. If it exists as externalized form, it isn't power. Why? All power is in me, God, Spirit. All power is in Spirit acting upon form, just as this hand cannot pet or punch. It just can't. It can only stay here dormant until I decide to pet or punch. I decide that, and it must be obedient to me. Let it try to disobey. It can't. I am the one that decides. Now then, you carry that out in the entire world, and you will find that there is no form, no creature that has power, will, jurisdiction, judgment, government. The government is on his shoulder. That means the invisible. Whenever we talk of God or his or Christ, we mean invisible. Now then, all power is in the invisible acting upon the visible. How many people do you know that before they came to truth study were continuously taking cathartics and found them absolutely necessary? Now, how many people do you know after they have been in metaphysics that ever are called upon to use any? I know from my experience that it's practically an unheard of thing among truth students. I've never known such a thing for 25 or more years. Or digestive tablets, or any of these common remedies that people are always taking for ailments because the body refuses to eliminate, or the body refuses to assimilate, or the body refuses to digest. Rarely do you find a metaphysician having recourse to such things. Why? Because the very first lesson that is learned is that it is the invisible that governs the visible organs and functions of the body. And the moment you stop trying to interfere with that, you will find that there is an invisible that does act upon the body and governs it harmoniously. Now to us it doesn't make any difference whether the name is Jones, Brown, or Smith who is not digesting or eliminating. We don't care anything about that. It can be Jones, Brown, or Smith asking for help, or it could be this whole room full. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one treatment, and that treatment is, what is the principle? The principle is that the organs of the body are not self-acting, that they cannot act or stop acting any more than this hand can. I govern it. I am the invisible. So it is, regardless of the nature of a disease, if it governs organs and functions of the body, there is only one remedy. And that is not in addressing your patient not calling your patient by name, not calling the disease by name, but turning within yourself and saying, what is the principle here? Then you say, oh, the principle is that the invisible governs the body. The invisible forces are the life and health and activity of the body. Well, that's right. If that's the principle, that's what I'll stand on. And that's the end of it. The patient may call up the next day and say, I'm worse. That sometimes happens. But that's all right. You go right back to your principle. You may have to go back to it the 3rd day or the 33rd day. But all you have to do is stand on your principle. Now, over and over in the writings and in these recordings, and more especially I have summed this up in the last Honolulu classes, and again in the Portland classes, and I'm going to do it again tonight. Please remember this. We, as practitioners, are not dealing with persons or conditions. We have nothing to do with that. You could send me a telegram with no signature on it and merely say, give me help. And I promise you that my average of 90% will still hold good. 90% of the cases you will get a quick response and healing. Why? I don't know who you are and I don't know what help you need. I know only one thing. What is the principle of my life? What principle do I live by? God is the principle of existence. God is the central theme. God is the life of all form. God is the only law. God is the only substance. God is the only cause. God is the only reality. Anything else is without law, substance, or reality. I don't care what it is. Nothing else has substance or reality or cause. Everything else exists as belief or theory or supposition. It might be a universally entertained belief like sitting in a draft will give you a cold. You know as well as I do there are prevalent beliefs that sitting in a draft or getting your feet wet will give you a cold. You can get your feet wet in the bathtub, but just don't do it on the street. You can go out in all the fresh air you want, but just don't let it blow in a window. But that doesn't say that people aren't victims of it. They are, because there is a universal belief about it. Now, you can't ignore it. You can't laugh at it. When a problem is presented to you of that nature, it doesn't make a difference who the man or woman is. What you have to say is, what is the principle? Oh, the principle is that spirit, the invisible alone, is cause. Oh, well, that's all right then. The draft can't be a cause, the wet feet can't be a cause. But the next case comes along, and says, I'm worried sick till I've got ulcers. And then you ask yourself, what is the principle? Well, the principle is, of course, that the creative principle of life is God. Now, how could it create ulcers? And the only lawgiver is God. How could it create a law of ulcers, a law of disease? The only law, if God is the lawgiver and God is spirit, the only law then is spirit. Well, it can't be a law of disease. It can't be a law of ulcers. And so it goes that never do you go back into the mind of your patient. If you do, you're on the mentological, mental science, or psychological, or psychosomatic, or psychiatry approach, which is a delving into your mind for the seed of the trouble. And what we have discovered is that your mind is not the seed of the trouble. What Mrs. Eddy termed a mortal mind, that is a suppositional mind, is the cause of the trouble. A claim of a mind apart from God. The belief that you have a mind of your own is the cause of the trouble. And as long as you are probed mentally, you're having it fastened on you. Just the same as going to a practitioner who keeps insisting on your telling all your symptoms and all your troubles. You know that. You have them. You've had them in every type of metaphysics since it began. And then the practitioner will give you a 2-finger treatment, sometimes a 3-finger treatment. They're more expensive. And then come out and say, oh, I know, it just comes to me. Your brother-in-law hates you. Or you live next door to a Roman Catholic, don't you? That's your trouble. Oh, you've got to move away from those Catholics. There you are. found the trouble. The only way you can get away is to move away. After you move away, you'll probably find they're high Episcopalians. Well, they're almost as bad. Now what happens if you move and get next to a Jewish family or a Hindu family? Now you're doomed. Because between the Catholics, the Jews, and the Orientals, there's no hope. If they even live a block away from you, move away. If you know how many families wouldn't live in an apartment house without first finding out if there are any Catholic families in there. It's nonsense, I know. It's nonsense. It is nonsense. But it isn't nonsense to the person who walks down the street and sees a priest or a nun and starts to shake and cross themselves. It isn't nonsense to them. They have been taught to give power to the thoughts of priests or nuns or Catholics, and they shiver when they see them. Well, the hexes in Pennsylvania are taught that they have people among themselves who can pray you to death, and so they grow up in fear of the hexes. They see a hexer walking down the street, they'll jump in a river to get away. Out in Hawaii, they used to have what they call bad kahunas. All you'd have to do is bring the hair of your enemy or a piece of his fingernail to a bad kahuna, and he would die tomorrow sure. And don't be surprised at this, they did die. Certainly they did. If you can generate enough fear of a Catholic or a Jew or an Oriental or a hexer or a kahuna, you're doomed. Because it's all taking place within you. The same place as your fear of germs. Why is it that metaphysical practitioners never seem to catch germ diseases from their patients, whereas the medical practitioner is always bathing himself and taking care of himself and alkalizing himself? But not your metaphysical practitioner. They never do it, and they never come down with these diseases. Why? Because it has been revealed to them that power is in the invisible, not in the visible. And so those germs, there's no denial that there are those germs, but they come and they go, they have their place, and that's that. Those of you who have read Alan Boone's new book, Kinship with All Life, should not be surprised that he walked to his icebox, his refrigerator, and found it full of ants one night and said, look here, you have no right to be eating my food. You have your own food, I'll gladly share with you, but not in my refrigerator. Now out. And the next day there were no ants there. Probably you think the ants haven't got an intelligence. Of course they have an intelligence, and you can address their intelligence. They'll probably be more obedient than your children, at least if they were my kind of children. Now, the point is this. Please understand this carefully, because you can do miracle healing work if you catch what I'm saying to you. Don't bother about the person. Do not be concerned with whether they're good ones or bad ones, or whether they've sinned or they haven't sinned. That's none of your business. You have no right to sit in judgment on them. We're taking the Master for our example. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. And if they sin again, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. And if they sin again, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. 70 times 7. Well, you just keep count up to 490 and you'll find they'll probably be healed before you get to 480. As long as you can keep forgiving, as long as you're not holding them in bondage to their errors, as long as you're not condemning and criticizing, because then you're putting the fault in them where it doesn't exist. The fault is in this universal belief of a selfhood apart from God. It's a universal belief of a mind apart from God. Now, there is only one mind. Now, that's the mode of practice. And the basis of it, understand this, is that individuals do not have a mind of their own. And therefore, the trouble is never in their mind. And there's no good of looking for it there. There's no good of pointing it out to them. If you discover the fault, just realize this, that it has no basis in fact. It has no law to support it or to maintain it. Then you'll nullify it in your patient, not by giving them a treatment. They get the treatment by virtue of having come to you for the help, or their parents have come to you for the help, or their nearest relative has come for the help. You are not concerned with giving a treatment to anyone. You are concerned with what is the principle. And as you know the principle within you, the patient is healed. Let us go back to the master. Is there any record that he told the patient to do something or other? Or what did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk? Or neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. In other words, he didn't ask them to read so many pages of Scripture. He didn't tell them to go to church. He didn't tell them to tithe. He merely said, rise. Maid, I say unto thee, rise. Lazarus, come forth. What did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. That's his answer. In other words, he wasn't expecting a patient to heal themselves. He understood that it was his degree of spiritual enlightenment that brought healing. But he did make a requirement. Do you believe that I can do this? There it is. If you have enough faith, call it if you like, discernment, to desire this help, you have a basic element. You might say, how do you know whether a person really has or whether they're pretending? That's their demonstration. If they haven't, they're the ones paying the penalty for it. In our work, it's always very easy. When people are willing to pay for it, you know right well they must have faith in it, because people don't pay for something they haven't got faith in. So the mere fact that a person makes an effort of their own to ask for the help and then express appreciation in the form of payment shows that there is a degree of faith in most cases. I don't mean that money is the evidence of it, but I mean those are evidences of what lies behind that. Oh, there are loads of people who haven't got money who have faith. But I'm only showing one illustration. The mere fact that people will ask for help shows that the things they have heretofore been depending on have failed them, and so they're looking in another direction, and they're putting enough faith in it to ask for the help. Now, actually, if they come to you in a sort of, oh, well, I don't know, but I hope so, well, that's about the demonstration they'll make. There is that point involved there, that there must be some degree of aroused hope or aroused vision or aroused faith to want the help or to want to read a book or to want to do something to show that they have some indication. Now, that is not an absolute necessity. How do we know that? Because we can heal more animals and children than we can heal adults. And they don't necessarily have faith. They don't even have faith enough to ask for it. The only thing that's in their favor is they are not resisting it by any, let's call it, concrete lack of faith. They're not resisting it by the mortal or material concepts of life that are built up in adults. And so animals are very easy to heal, children are very easy to heal, and so it goes. Another class that are not difficult to heal are sinners. The real difficult ones are the nice righteous people, because they know they're righteous and they shouldn't have this inflicted on them. And that acts as a barrier, because nobody is good of their own accord. Everybody is good who is good because of the divinity working through them. And the moment they get the belief that they are good and they deserve a special treatment for their goodness, they're very difficult to reach. But a sinner comes to you and says, look, I know I'm a sinner and I know I don't deserve anything, but if you've got a little trick up your sleeve, pull it for me, will you? And those are the fellows who are really open for it. That's why we have miracle works and prison work. Now, above all, however, those things are all just side issues. The major issue is this. 90% of all healing work is the responsibility of the practitioner. Hasn't got much reason to alibi in at least 90% of his cases, because if the practitioner is living in this one principle, God is really all. God is the only law. I'm accepting no appearance, because I see through the appearance and I know God to be the mind of this individual, the soul, the spirit, the reality, the cause. All this other is a mental image and thought without power, without presence, without substance, without law.